Hello and welcome to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. Is the Russiagate story losing steam? Is it being replaced with who bugged whom, when, and why? Is the shoe now on the other foot? Cross-talking Washington's never-ending scandal. I'm joined by my guest here in Moscow, Dmitry Babich. He's a political analyst with Sputnik International. We also have Mark Sloboda. He's an international affairs and security analyst. And in London, we cross to Marcus Papadopoulos. He is the editor of Politics First magazine. All right, gentlemen, crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want. I always appreciate it. Marcus, if I can go to you in London first, I'm sure you saw some of the Senate hearings on Russian meddling in the American election. I just have to give my honest appraisal. I thought it was a disgrace. It was very, very embarrassing for a country that calls itself the beacon of freedom in the world and the rule of law, particularly when we had a former functionary from the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton campaign aide come out and tell on MSNBC exactly what was going on. That story wasn't on the Senate floor. It was chasing phantoms that was being talked about, particularly the station you're on right now. Go ahead, Marcus.
Well, the political crisis engulfing America is really quite extraordinary. It's remarkable. But it does have to be said that neither side are corroborating their assertions with concrete evidence. The allegations against Trump are tenuous, but at the same time, the allegation by Trump against Obama that the Obama administration bugged Trump Tower has not been produced with any evidence whatsoever. But you know, Peter, I come at this from a slightly different angle. You know, the last time I supported an American politician was in 1988 when I was 9 years old, and I supported Michael Dukakis in the American presidential election.
Wow.
Since then,
Wow.
I've come to the opinion that all American politicians are as bad as each other. And I would say this as well. I would urge people who support countries' rights to pursue an independent foreign policy, such as Russia, not to choose sides in this conflict in America. Because America is the biggest cutthroat in the world. And I think it's some sort of consolation to see them engulfed in this crisis. It's some sort of satisfaction for what they've done to countries such as Yugoslavia and Iraq.
Agreed. You know, but Mark here, but what is important here, Marcus is absolutely right, and I'm not trying to personalize it here at all. And on this program, it has not been personalized during the election campaign and since. But I have stressed process here, and you have to have, if one side demands the other side of process, the other side can demand the same thing. And I think this is what's really at the heart of it here. Marcus is absolutely right. Very little evidence has ever been shown the public after so many months here. But we do have a functionary that has come out and said exactly what a lot of people suspected. I hope she goes in front of Congress and under oath and gives her story. Mark.
Yeah, I got to disagree with Marcus a little bit there. America is America, and it produces the politicians that are reflective of its culture and its empire around the world, but there are differences between them, and we've already seen quite a number of very impactful foreign policy differences coming out of the Trump administration. So we don't have to pick sides, but we can discuss both character and policy, and there are differences. The Senate Intelligence Committee hearing, it was the first public one. The Senate Intelligence Committee hearing, unlike its House Un-American Activities counterpart.
You mean McCarthyism 2.0?
Yeah, McCarthyism 2.0 has been quieter thus far, but this last week changed things completely. For me, one of the most surreal, and it would be comedic if it weren't so very tragic moments, was when Senator Joe Manchin looked right at the camera and he said, "I remember when as a child, if I hid beneath my school desk, it protected me when the Russians launched nuclear war on us, launched nuclear bombs at us. But I don't think that my Senate desk would protect me now." We make the assumption that he's talking about Russian information warfare. And the their pet neocon Russophobe, who was the star of this little
Mr. Watts.
comedy, Clinton Watts, replied back, "No, sir, Senator, it wouldn't. It wouldn't protect you from the Russians."
But Dima, you know, one of the things, and I watched part of it, and it's very difficult to watch because it was so hard to take it seriously. Again, the station that you're appearing on right now was in focus here. So I have to say this to the U.S. Senate and our viewers. So if the election was thrown, why didn't they throw California and New York? RT doesn't have enough strength in those two states. I mean, this is getting to be absurd. Go ahead.
Well, I was not surprised by these assertions because it looked exactly like the Soviet Union in the early 80s, probably even before that. And for me, the article of the week was the interview with Stephen Cohen, where he talked about Sovietization of U.S. politics. I have to slightly disagree with Marcus again. I also supported Michael Dukakis. I saw him at the Northeastern University where he walked after failing. He told me he was sorry. He gave me a bad advice. He said that Bill Clinton could be a nice guy. But anyway, I think that what we are fighting against is it's not particular countries or even empires. It's the ideology. If you look at the European Union, they turned out to be more hostile to Russia than even the United States, because the ideological side of the European Union is even stronger than in the United States. The Russophobic side is just a part of their globalist ideology. So
in some parts of the European
exactly.
Union.
So when I read Steve Cohen's word about Sovietization of American policy, when he compared what he saw on American television now to what he saw in the Soviet Union, where he traveled there between 1976 and 1982, all the similarities.
Yeah.
You know, when they attacked the White House in the Soviet Union in the late 70s, they always attacked Voice of America and Radio Free Europe in the same phrases. You know, I like the words, I think, from James Comey, yes, about RT. They sowed doubt about this great country of ours. Well, that sounds exactly like what we heard in the early 80s.
Okay, I noticed that, Marcus, you wanted to jump in there here. I mean, again, it's really an info war, and this is what I think is very disturbing here is that, and I agree with you, the Trump administration needs to prove its allegation of being bugged, but I think there's smoke there, unlike the other narrative that's being played here. But this is it's really at stake here. It's a narrative, it's narrative versus narrative that has been politicized, and the deep state is right in the thick of it all. Go ahead, Marcus.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's necessary to criticise the Soviet Union. Let's just keep focused on America. Now, when it comes to allegations coming out of Washington, well, since when has America needed evidence? If we look at its foreign policy going back in the last 25 years, they made totally unfounded accusations during the Yugoslav wars. They made unfounded allegations against Iraq, Libya, Ukraine, and Syria. So I think it's completely unsurprising.
Okay, but Marcus, I think what is different.
Keep things in perspective.
Marcus, what is different here is that I agree with everything that you're saying here, but this is within the American political elite, this kind of conflict, this warfare that's being played out. That is significantly different than what the cases that you've been bringing up here. Don't you agree?
Yes, I think it's significant, but at the end of the day, this is an internal American conflict, and I think we should just let them go for each other's jugulars. I really do, and I don't think anyone should be making excuses for the Trump administration by saying it's being forced into doing these things around the world. Because if you're going to go down that road, you need to apply that to Obama. Because when Obama entered the White House, he said he wants to change American foreign policy, he wants to reset relations with Russia, no more wars. Well, we know what happened with him. So I think we need to treat Trump like we treated Obama, as adults. They're fully grown men. They knew what they were taking on when they entered the White House. If people are now going to say that they're being forced into taking these foreign policy decisions, well, I think that's absolutely ridiculous and untenable.
Yeah, well, Mark, but I think that one can ask the question: is American foreign policy, given what Marcus just said, in some kind of autopilot? Because in some ways it does appear to be that way. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, well, of course, we've long talked about the deep state, the national security state, the blob at the foreign policy that would like to continue the policies of the Clinton, Bush, and Obama administrations, and you can go back further than that. But already I think you're seeing noticeable difference, and this is the fight back we're seeing in Washington. Just this week, one of the most interesting facets is we know that we have had dueling anonymous leakers out of the deep state at this point combating each other. But what's most interesting is that we had leakers now on the side of shall we say, the Clinton diehards and the former administration, the establishment, come out and leak the identities of the leakers that were exposing that Trump was surveilled by the Obama administration during the campaign.
That is very, very important, but I don't see that it's being given the coverage that it deserves. I mean, I keep seeing the changing back to the other narrative. The Russians did it. The Russians did it.
Russia,
okay?
yes, Russia.
I mean, this is what really truly disturbs me here is that you see this Russiagate story disintegrating piece by piece, but they seem to double down more and more on it.
Exactly, and that's what Alexander Mercuris noted in his article for the Durand.com.
Yeah.
He noticed that the backbone, the foundation of the Russiagate story was this so-called Trump dossier from MI6,
sexed up dossier
from MI6 agent, what's his name, Christopher Steele,
former.
And the problem is that this dossier was simply built on wrong facts,
But Dima and Mark and Marcus, we all knew that when it was released. Why are they still talking about it?
But it's the same story as with the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It's the same story as with Vietnamese attacking the poor American vessels near Vietnam. They just double down because so much ink has been spilled already. They have been using that story so long. And when the story turns out to be empty, I would like to look at the faces of all of these people,
Oh, I know the answer. Somehow Putin tricked us again, okay? Because that's exactly what that Evelyn Farkas has said. When she was told, confronted, she said, it's probably a Russian operation. All right, gentlemen, I have to jump in here. We're going to go to a short break. And after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on stories in the news. Stay with our team.
I'm Max Kaiser with more of my guide to financial survival. This is a hedge fund. It's a device used by professional scallywags to earn money. That's right. These hedge funds are completely non-accountable, and we're just adding more and more to them. Totally destabilizing the global economy. You need to protect yourself and get informed. Watch Kaiser Report.
Problems with the supply of flour provoke fears of hunger in Petrograd. This leads to massive strikes in February and March, with the people demanding bread. To prevent further demonstrations, the provisional government forms a civil police force, easily identified by their special white armbands. But that was just the start of many more changes to come.
Welcome back to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing some of the stories in the news. Okay, Marcus, earlier in the program we were talking about continuity of American foreign policy, but one thing I think we all have to admit, at least rhetorically right now, is that we had Secretary of State Tillerson come out remarkably saying, and I'm paraphrasing, Assad can stay. I mean, after all of what's happened in that country, the horrific international proxy war that has been fueled on by outside forces, you have a Secretary of State that says, without any kind of international law foundation, that the legitimate government of Damascus can say. I mean, I find that really remarkable, if in a pathetic way. Go ahead, Marcus.
Yes, a Secretary of State who believes that God wanted him to become Secretary of State. But, you know, I think we should be very, very careful to what the Americans are saying now about Syria. On the one hand, I believe that they understand their policy to remove Assad has failed because they underestimated the resolve of the Syrian army and the Syrian people to defend their government. And the Americans understand that the Russian military is in Syria and that is the end of it. But on the other hand, we have seen under the Trump administration an escalation, an increase of the American presence in Syria. We have seen hundreds of American Marines deployed to northern Syria with heavy artillery. We know that Trump is going to dispatch another 1,000 in the next few months. So I think what the Americans have reverted to here is Plan B. They know they're not going to be able to get their Islamist allies into Damascus, but they are looking to maintain a presence in northern Syria through their allies. For example, the terrorist so-called Free Syrian Army, the terrorist al-Nusra, and I think they will try and do that through partition. So, in my opinion, what Rex Tillerson has said should just be ignored. If the Trump administration really wants to end what the Obama administration did in Syria, number one, stop supporting every Islamist terrorist group and pull out all the American soldiers in northern Syria. Well, of course, Trump is not going to do that. His administration is as hostile to Syria as the Obama one was, as he is towards Russia as well. A very hostile attitude Trump has towards Russia.
Okay, Marcus brought up the key word, the P word, and I tend to agree with it. Partition. This is what they're driving for. This is the Plan B, partition.
I have
seen
no evidence of that whatsoever, and I've been watching for it very, very carefully.
Yeah, but once the Americans put troops in, they create a footprint, and they don't like to leave that footprint. Okay, that's precedent.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about what the deep state wants versus what the Trump administration wants and which direction they'll go in. But first of all, let me correct Marcus. In northern Syria, where U.S. troops are present, the Free Syrian Army and al-Nusra are not present. That is the territory of the Kurds, the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are essentially the Kurdish YPG and a few local Arab tribes. Second of all, the Trump administration has stopped illegally arming, supplying, and providing the salaries of the Free Syrian Army.
That is not true. President Assad has said that is not true. Okay. President Assad has said that is not true. President Assad, in an interview, has said there is no evidence that the Americans have stopped supporting the various Islamist
Okay, President Assad can say that, but Reuters and the FSA commanders
disagree. Go ahead, Dima. And they say there's never any disagreement on this program. Go ahead, Dima.
Even if we cannot prove, that the Americans send troops or don't send weapons to these groups. What I'm interested in, just today I found a statement by the spokesman for the American forces in Iraq and Syria from March 2016, exactly a year ago, when the Syrian forces recaptured Palmyra. This person, Steve Warren, his name is a colonel, said that I'm not sure people in Palmyra will be better off under Assad than they were under ISIS. So a year has passed. And we have now the American administration basically saying officially that we are not after replacing Assad, we are going to concentrate on fighting ISIS. This person, this Steve Warren, should be fired, but he won't be fired. People who talk to the Russian ambassador will be fired, and this guy will keep his job, and next time he will be telling again that Assad is worse than ISIS.
If people were fired for being wrong, you would never see anyone on mainstream television again, because it'd all be fired, okay, including everyone in the administration.
So I'm just operating with facts.
Okay.
I don't know who supplies weapons where, but I see the statements, and I think they should be held to account
political
for
outcomes. Marcus, we've all been watching, and even on this program, the debacles being played out in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Somalia, in Syria. Why should anyone, rational person, think that this administration is going to get it right when prior administrations never could? I mean, thinking that they can empower the Kurds is somehow going to solve these problems. It's not going to solve any problem at all. As much as I may be sympathetic to the Kurds wanting self-determination, it's not going to work out. You either have a sovereign Syria or you don't. Go ahead, Marcus.
I agree. And Peter, you made a very good point a few moments ago when you said once the Americans have their troops in the country, it's very, very difficult to get them out. And I think there's no question about it. The Americans are going to utilize their contacts with al-Nusra and the so-called Free Syrian Army and the Kurds to make sure they have a presence in northern Syria. But you know, Peter, I said during that presidential election last year, and I've said since then, there is a curious and misguided sense of optimism about the Trump administration, that foreign policy is going to radically change. There was no tangible evidence to support that assertion. And what have we seen in regard to Trump and Russia? He said that the Crimea was stolen by Russia and it needs to be given back. He said that Russia is responsible for the conflict in the Donbass. He said that Russia is in violation of the INF Treaty. He said the American nuclear arsenal is going to be the largest in the world, which is of course going to be a threat to the Russian strategic nuclear deterrence. And now we see under Trump NATO forces increasing their presence on Russia's borders. We see more American soldiers in northern Syria. Nothing is going to change under the Trump administration.
All these are facts
and
here.
These first few months of it demonstrate that.
Okay, but that means one of two things. It is business as usual, and Trump didn't keep his word during the campaign, which politicians do all the time. Or, Mark, Trump just isn't in control of his foreign policy. Okay, it's one or the other.
Okay, well, I disagree. It's not either one or the other. There are definite foreign policy changes. I've seen them. Second of all, the Trump administration is arming the Kurds. It has increased arm to the Kurds. The Kurds are not a viable partition partner, because that would alienate the United States from Turkey, which it needs in NATO for its military bases. It would alienate the United States further from Iraq. No regional power wants an independent Kurdistan.
Everybody knows this, then why are they doing it?
Because maybe, just maybe, Trump is doing what he actually said he would do, and he's going to fight ISIS. And the Kurds are the best ones to do that.
To fight ISIS is very, very simple. It could have been done a very long time ago. We've said it many times in this program. Join up with Russia, work with the Assad government, work with Iran, and it would be done.
And it would be done. They've started doing that around Manbij, where the Russian, the Syrian, the U.S. military, and the Kurds cooperated to contain the Turkish and the FSA zone of invasion and occupation.
Again, one can be sympathetic or not sympathetic to the Kurds, but empowering them the way they are, the way they're being empowered, has no happy ending for anybody, anyone.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
All the specialists on the region say that if there is a way to explode it even further than it has exploded until now, it is to support the Kurds and to push them into some kind of a conflict with Turkey and with other forces on the ground.
Can I remind you both that both the Russian and the Syrian governments have armed, supplied, and provided close air support for the Kurds as well?
That is also true, but let me. What I find really threatening is a quote by Reuters from an unnamed White House official. He said that Assad is never going to have sufficient force to reassert control over the whole country of Syria. So that's a hint at partition, which Peter mentioned in the beginning. And I kind of agree with Marcus in general, because, for example, what Tillerson said just a few days ago at the meeting of foreign ministers of NATO, let me quote it: "The NATO alliance is fundamental to countering both non-violent but also violent Russian aggression, agitation and intimidation." Well, how can agitation be violent and how can aggression be non-violent? I don't know, but Trump said it. And there is one good development where I agree with Mark. That is that at last we have a real conflict between the Congress, between the press, and the president in the United States. So probably now the aggressors will fight each other, sometimes even more than they're fighting peaceful people around the world.
Okay, Marcus, let me get a broad stroke question for you. We have this scandals being played out in the U.S., and we have also the enduring Brexit story for the UK. Just how afraid are the political establishment and its pliant media with all of these shifts going on in the sand here? Because I think that's a much broader, important question to be looking at, because I think the political establishment in the U.S. is terrified. Go ahead, Marcus.
Yes, I think politicians in the West in general, be it America, Britain, France and Germany, are rattled at the moment. They're rattled by this public backlash.
Yep.
But no one should be under an illusion that a revolution is going to break out in America or Britain. That is not going to happen. And I have to say, Peter, use the expression just now, business as usual. You know, things will start to settle in America, things will start to settle in Britain, and business as usual will maintain.
But nothing will be resolved.
If I can just quickly go back to that point.
Nothing will be resolved. Nothing will be resolved.
Nothing will be resolved. Nothing will be resolved. Nothing will be resolved. I think the West is weakened, but it still is a formidable force.
Absolutely.
So I don't think we should be optimistic that there's going to be positive changes.
Let me give Mark the last 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about a weakened West that is scared at this point. If we take a look at where the Senate Intelligence Committee hearing went, the same direction that the Obama administration's Director of National Intelligence report trying to blame Putin did it on the election. They presented no evidence to support this Russian hacking or Russian influence. So again, they went the same direction. They cobbled up attacks on Russian media, on RT, and on Sputnik. And I consider that a feather in my cap. Yes, my faith has been undermined in American society. I do question more, and that is what I'm doing on this platform. I served 6 years in military uniform, and I have the right to criticize my government and foreign policy on any platform I choose.
On that very patriotic point, we've run out of time. Many thanks to my guests here in Moscow and in London, and thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, crosstalk rules.
I love it.